Hello, welcome. This is Jennifer, and I am glad you're here. Now, today I am sharing with you 4 simple yet very impactful ways to add instant dimension to your cards. Now, I've shared many ideas for how to create that pop-up effect, but these are 4 of my favorites, and I thought I'd pull them together in one video. The best part about these is they flatten nicely to go into an envelope, and when you take them out, they have amazing dimension on display. Another great thing about the ideas I share today is that they can be done with a variety of products that you have on hand, and you'll see that by the various styles of cards that I do. Okay, let's get started with our first example. Now, this one I think is best to see the completed card in action. When you take it out of an envelope, it's flat, but when it comes out, you have the water cup coming towards you. And so it'll stand up really cool on display. So the card itself kind of looks like a backdrop. And you'll see here that when I stand it up on the table, the bottom of the cup hits the table, as does the bottom of the card, giving a really unique look. And keep in mind, you could do this with like a flower vase there at the bottom or a little scene of critters. Many ways to do this. Now, the products I chose to use are new from Concord and Ninth. This is the H2 Hello set. Now, these are styled after the popular type of water bottles that folks use, and it's such a playful design. Now, with the die set, you can make large water cups or you can make small ones. So you can do a little series of them. The sentiments go along with it well. And as I've been saying in videos lately, I'm really loving these really unique type of products companies are coming out with. It's a nice change of pace, and theme cards are always fun to make. So I will be making one of the bigger water bottles today. I also grabbed some colors of Concord and Ninth cardstock that I'll use on this card, and I'll use on a couple of the other cards in today's video. The first piece that I created is the center of the cup, and this has like kind of a curved rectangle look with 2 flaps on the side. I white heat embossed a sentiment on there that I love, and now that's ready to add to the large cup itself. To make the cup stronger, I die cut 2 and glued it together. That'll make it strong when it pops up. Now, to add this center part onto the cup is really clever. It's going to have some dimension to it. You glue 1 flap down up against the edge of your cup, and I'll put something heavy on that while it dries. Now, you could just cut these flaps off and glue it directly onto the cup if you wanted to, but just wait. It'll give kind of a curved look that really gives the feel of what these cups look like in real life. Now, I did put 2 strong magnets on that. I work on a glass magnetic surface, so that just holds it in place. I'll link to the glass work surface I use below that comes with the magnets. Now, while that dries, I'm taking some of the smaller dies that are included in this die set, and I want to cut them all at once. And instead of fussing with a bunch of individual dies, I like to tape them together with some temporary tape. Then I put anti-static powder tool on all the exposed tape. Now I can start die cutting with that, and each time I'll be able to peel up all those dies together and move them onto the next piece of cardstock. So next time you need to use a bunch of small dies repeatedly, try taping them together. And by putting that anti-static powder onto it, that keeps it from sticking to the cardstock and having to peel it off each time. All right, back to our cup. I want to add a little dimension behind that piece that we've added. So I'm putting 2 pieces of foam tape in there. You don't need to remove the release paper here unless you want to. It's really not to adhere anything here, but rather put some dimension behind it so that that curved part of the cup stays curved. All right, so now I'm putting liquid adhesive on the other end, fold the other flap in, and now glue that flap right up against the edge of this other side of the cup. And I'm going to hold that with my fingers or put something heavy on it. So now you can see how that part of the cup has a curved look to it, making it look even more realistic. You can skip that step and just glue it down flat if you prefer, but I love that Concord and Ninth created that brilliant little addition to this cup. Now I can glue the pieces to the top of it, so this is the lid, and I made that from sea glass cardstock and a strip of white. By the way, about these magnets that I use to hold things down, I also like to use like a heavy paperweight or a crystal block to hold things down as they dry, which you've seen me do in videos many times. I do both still. The nice thing about the magnets on my magnetic glass work surface is that I can put pressure in just small areas. The nice thing about the acrylic block is that or the crystal block is I can put it over a large area. So I've been using both, and you'll see me use both throughout this video. But really anything heavy you can add to really make contact when you use liquid adhesive is a good thing. Now off screen, I used some of the flower and leaf dies in the same H2 Hello die set, and I decorated my cup with that. And now I'm using Concord and 9th enamel dots for the flower centers. I really like their enamel dots because in the set there are 3 different sizes, which is always good, and they come in all the colors to match all their cardstocks and their inks. All right, now let's create our background. I wanted something subtle behind it, but not too distracting. So I thought I'd do some soft stenciling. I have a piece of Concord and 9th Nectar cardstock and a Concord and 9th Dots and Blossoms stencil. I'll show you this stencil and the other one it comes with later in this video. Now over the stencil, I'm putting a light amount of Concord and 9th Nectar ink. I want something subtle, and I'm not really applying the ink solid. I'm kind of doing it in a light way so they don't look like solid dots, but rather a bit of texture. It's just another way to use your stencils. So this will be a nice backdrop to that cup that will pop up off of our card. Now I glued that to the center of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding white note card. I do recommend a top folding card for this technique. Now let's create our pop-up. To do this, I have a piece of cardstock that is 1 inch by 4 inch, and you could change this up if you wanted to. I will do a few score lines. The first is at 1/2 inch. The next one is at 1.5. The next one after that is at 2.5. And the final one is at 3.5. And then I will fold along these score lines, all folding in, kind of creating what will look like a box from the side. So you can see here it looks like kind of a box when it's all folded up. Now to add this to the card is very easy to do. I'm going to put strong adhesive along one of the flaps and glue it to the bottom of the card. Now I like to use liquid adhesive here so I can wiggle it and get it in just the right place, but double-sided tape would work also. So you can see I'm putting that adhesive just on one of those flaps. Now I'll place this flap so that it is lined up with the bottom of our card. So the first score line, sorry my head gets in the way there, the first score line will line up with the bottom of the card. And I'm using the grid lines on the background of my work surface to kind of get this as centered as possible. So now I'll press that down and I'll hold it up here so you can see how this entire piece is kind of sticking out. It looks like a tail on the back of a card cat. I don't know. And this will all fold in to create a pop-up, but you can see there how it's attached. By the way, I made that 1 inch wide. You could make it a little more narrow if needed, or wider if you have a bigger piece. Now on the other flap, on the other end, I'll put some strong adhesive and I'll fold that down so the 2 ends meet up on the back of the card. And it looks like this box sticking out from the bottom of our card. So I'll hold this up so you can see those 2 flap ends meet together on the card and this sticks out. And this will be able to flatten and pop up very easily when we put this in our card or in our envelope and take it out. Now we can add our cup to this, and I want to make it so that when the card is flat, the bottom of my cup lines up with the bottom of the card. What I'm going to do is put strong liquid adhesive on this topmost panel. So you can see I'm putting liquid adhesive on that topmost panel of our pop-up. Now I want to flatten this down. You're going to flatten the pop-up down, lay your cup onto it, making sure the bottom of the cup lines up with the bottom of the card. Now at this point I realized that you could see a little bit of my pop-up because it was a bit too wide for our narrow cup. Instead of starting over, I'm just going to wing it here. I'm going to take my scissors and just chop a little bit of the corner of that pop-up off the bottom right and off the bottom left. If I would have started with a slightly narrower pop-up, it would have been fine. But this worked out no problem, so I decided not to start over. Okay, so now let's put some more adhesive on that top platform. We will flatten that down and put our cup onto it so the bottom of the cup lines up with the bottom of the card. Now when this dries, what will happen is it pops up so that when you stand the card on display, the bottom of the card touches the table, but so does the bottom of the cup. So it looks like the cup is kind of floating there, standing on its own. Now, there is a smaller straw that comes with this die set, but I wanted a longer one. So I actually used that narrow die that's meant for creating the top of your cup. I used that as the straw. And then there's this cute little straw topper that's really popular right now, so I added that to the top of my straw. Now I'm using a bit of liquid adhesive and running that right along the edge of that peach piece of cardstock, the nectar cardstock with the dots, and then placing a thin strip of grapefruit cardstock. So I like to keep these thin strips like this before I throw any kind of scrap away. If it's even the tiniest sliver, I'll keep it to do things like this. This looks like I matted that nectar piece with grapefruit cardstock, but really I just used 2 thin strips, and it gives it nice definition. Let's look at the completed card. I have an Altenew envelope where I stamped the H2 Hello. I love that Altenew has colored envelopes, and they match really nicely with these Concord and 9th cardstocks. Now for the card itself, you can see it flattens and that cup fits nicely on the front, but when you take it out, it has this pop-up dimension. And when you stand it on your table, the bottom of the card touches the table, and so does the bottom of the cup. So it looks like that cup is kind of standing on its own, floating in front of the card. Here's kind of what it looks like from the side. Pretend that envelope is the table. You can see how it stands out nicely. And I stamped one of the other playful sentiments on the inside. I love these sentiments. Now here's a closer look at all the details. I did add some clear enamel dots to the background just for a little added interest. And you can see that huge amount of instant dimension that you get when you take this out of the envelope. So try this with some of the products you have. It's a great way to look like you have a floating element standing in front of your card base when it's on display. Okay, my next card idea shows how to make your card front pop up off of your note card. So you could do this with any products. Now my card is a bit bigger. However, you can also do this with any size card. Now the dies I used for this are super cool. These are from Concord and 9th, and I so hope they come out with more like this. If you like doing puzzles, this is right up your alley. So much fun and easy to do. This is the Spring Print, and it is a background die that cuts pieces that you put together to create a beautiful floral scene. It also has a large thanks and hello die, which I can use with a lot of cards, and some postage dies. There is a coordinating stamp set that has sentiments and images that line up nicely with those little postage dies and add nicely onto these cards. Now, I originally thought I would add some stenciling to some of these elements, and I'm going to have to try that sometime because I think it would look really neat. These are the stencils that I used one of these before. I used the dot one before. These are the dots and blossom stencils. What you could do on the card that I'm about to create is do some stenciling on the different colors of cardstock before you die cut them, and that would add some interest to the solid cardstock pieces that you die cut. Another thing you could do with the card I'm about to create is use pattern papers. That would give beautiful results too. But I'm using solid cardstock today since this is the first time I'm using this die. What I'm doing is cutting from different colors of cardstock the background die. So that one die I'll cut from a bunch of different colors. And here I have a top folding white note card that's 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches, and I'm covering it with double-sided adhesive. I find this is a really easy way to put all these pieces together, but you could also put glue on the back of each piece as you piece them together. Now I'm putting that card into the corner of my scoreboard. You could also use the corner of your MISTI stamping tool to make sure I line up that first piece right up against the corner of the card. Then I use the release paper from my double-sided adhesive to press that down. Now I'll do the same thing with the piece that goes along this right-hand edge, making sure that it's lined up with the corner of my card by using the corner of my scoreboard. Now the rest of the pieces just pop in place. And again, I cut these from different pieces of cardstock. This is a great way to use up some scraps. If you wanted to add interest, some of these pieces you could cut from pattern paper, glitter paper, metallic paper, or you could cut from solid cardstock and add some ink blending for the look of dimension before you glue it together. But I really wanted kind of like a modern look to this, so I just went with plain cardstock. Now piecing these together is pretty easy to do. I'm just following the example that comes on the packaging, and they fit together again like a puzzle. And because I have that adhesive, everything white there has adhesive on it, these just pop in place and I don't have to deal with putting adhesive on the back of each piece. Okay, so once I have puzzle pieced all these together, I did die cut additional pieces to glue on top of some of the pieces so that there's some additional dimension. So like on the darker green pieces, I added a couple extra die cuts so that stood out. And on some of the layers of the flowers, I did additional layers so it would stand out. But you could skip that if you wanted a smooth look. At this point, I thought I was going to make my note card like this, but I thought let's add some pop-up dimension. So I'm cutting the back of this off, and I'll save that piece of cardstock for something else. And now I'll add this to a bigger card. So that panel that we have assembled is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And I have a white note card that is 5 by 7. I'm going to trim that down a little bit so the proportions are right. And I end up making this note card about 5 inches wide by about 6 1/4 inches tall. So now it looks like it goes perfectly with that panel we're adding on the front. So now let's do a pop-up feature so that whole panel pops up from our card. I'm starting with a piece of white cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. You could change the size of this if you want. You can make it smaller. I'm doing 3 score lines on one end. The first score line's at a 1/2 inch. The second score line will be at 1 inch. And the next score line will be at 1.5 inches. So no matter what size your cardstock is here, do those score lines, 1/2 inch, 1 inch, and 1.5 inches. Then rotate your cardstock and do the same thing on the other end, 1/2 inch, 1 inch, and 1.5 inches. So now we have this piece with 3 score lines on each side, and we're going to accordion fold on both sides. So again, if you are popping up a smaller element, like I'm doing this big card panel that's popping up, if you want to pop up a smaller element, just make the starting piece of cardstock smaller and do those same 3 score lines on both ends. Okay, so I did an accordion fold here, used my bone folder to kind of flatten those, and now we have this pop-up platform. I'll put strong adhesive along the 2 flaps here, and then place this on the back of our card panel. This will give that platform for our whole panel to pop up. And because this pop-up feature we made is pretty big, it will have the strength to pop up. And basically what's happening is those accordion folds we did act like springs that will pop this up when we take it out of the envelope. So now I put glue on that platform and I'll press this right onto the center of our note card. Sorry, my head gets in the way. I want to make sure it's centered, and put something heavy on it while it dries. So here's our completed card. You can see it flattens nicely to go into an envelope, and then watch it just pop up. So when this is on display, that card panel is kind of floating there in front of the card. This is such an impactful way to make a simple card design stand out even more. Another quick thing that I did to make this card stand out is I sprayed the entire card with gold glitter dust spray. I took it outside, sprayed it with the gold glitter dust, and it's hard to see in the video. I wish you could see it. There's this fine glitter dust over the entire card, and the light and the sun captures it beautifully. I can't capture it in the video, but I'm telling you, that gold glitter dust is a must-have. It's something great that you can spray over different elements or over an entire card. Now the overall size of this card again is 5 by 6 1/4 inches, and I cut a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch panel to go on the inside just to give a nice finished look, and I stamped a sentiment on it. I also used some enamel dots from Concord and 9th on the flower and die cut thanks 3 times from white cardstock. Stacked those together and added it to the front. I love how this looks like something that you would see in an art gallery kind of popping off the wall. Okay, my third card isn't exactly a pop-up card. However, when this card stands up on display, the elements on the front definitely look like they're floating. So let me show you the completed card so you can get an idea of where we're headed. It's somewhat a tri-fold card, and that front element kind of swings and floats out there. So when it's on display, it looks like it's floating in front of the card. Now this is something you can do with lots of different products. I really like it for large focal point elements, such as the cluster of lemons and oranges we're creating today. This is the new Concord and 9th citrus stamp set and die set. These can be bought together or separately, and they are fantastic. Again, I love a good theme these days. It really changes up what I normally do and makes something fun to create. So the die set has the pieces to make lemons, limes, oranges, grapefruits, whatever you want. And there are dies to cut out the main sentiments in the stamp set. Now, I also like that there's a thanks included because that could be used on other theme cards too. Now, there is a citrus twist turnabout stamp that goes along with this. I'm not using this today, but I wanted to show you because it coordinates so nicely. So if you look here on the back, if you stamp this image once, you get what's at the top. Then you rotate it and stamp it again for the second, rotate it again for the third, and rotate it again to create a multiple color full background. Now, if you've never used a turnabout stamp, I will link to a video up here in the top right that shows you how to use them. It really is a fun type of product that's exclusive to Concord and Ninth. Okay, so for this card, I have an Altenew sticky mat that I'm going to put my note card under. That's a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card. This sticky mat will help to hold all my die cuts in place as I arrange them. If I were to do this just directly on top of my note card, those pieces would move around a lot and be a little bit frustrating. This is definitely helpful in arranging things until you're happy, and then you can add your glue. So I have the You're the Zest sentiment that I stamped in black on white cardstock, and I put an extra die cut behind that sentiment so it's nice and strong. Behind that, I'm tucking in some lemons and orange slices. Keep in mind you could also do limes and grapefruits, but I'm sticking with the yellow and the orange. So I'm just moving these around until I'm happy with like kind of a cluster that I've created there at the center. By putting that white note card behind the sticky mat, I have a guide for how wide and how tall I want this arrangement to be, so I know how it'll fill that card front. I was happy with the arrangement here, so now I will lift up some of the elements and add some liquid adhesive. I use just a little bit of the liquid adhesive now. I can always go back and squirt more in a little bit later on so that I can make sure everything is secure. Now you notice also that I use those magnets to really make sure everything connects and kind of holds it in place as it dries. Again, you could also use a crystal block to do so, but by using the magnets, I still have room to work around it and add other elements. So I'll continue to add little leaves and little flowers and such until I'm happy with that cluster right there at the front of the card. Also, once it's dry, I can remove it from my sticky mat so that I have this one element to work with now. Now you can see I had a mess up on the back of my cardstock, so I die cut another one of the white sentiment die cuts. I'll put glue on the front of it and place this on the back of our cluster so that it covers that up and just makes this a nice solid element that we can have swinging out on the front of our card. To create our note card, I'm starting with a piece of white cardstock that is 5.5 inches tall by 9 3/4 inches wide. I will do my first score line at 2 inches. And then my second score line at 6 inches. Now we can fold these together to create kind of a tri-fold card. Now the overall card size for this is 5.5 inches tall by 4 inches wide. So it's a little bit narrow compared to what I usually make, but that really made the math easier on where to do your score lines. So this is 5.5 by 4 inches. And because the card is a little narrow, I can make sure that some of my leaves kind of hang off the edge, which is always fun to do, and it'll still fit in the envelope. Next, we need a small piece of cardstock that will score in half. I have a 2 inch by 2 inch piece here, and I'm scoring it right down the center at 1 inch, and I'll fold it. So basically, we're creating like a little mini note card. This is the piece that will make our card element swing. So on one side of this, I'll put some strong adhesive, and I'll line it up so the fold line of the small piece lines up with the straight edge of that front flap on our card. So you can see how it sticks out there. So this is the key to making this card work, and it's super easy to do. Now I'll put some strong adhesive onto that flap there, the small flap that's facing up, and then I will add my element onto it. I'll put something very big and heavy on it while it dries, so I have my crystal block here. I really want to make sure that all connects. I then finish this little cluster of elements here. I finish it off by adding some little flowers, and I also add little dots that are included in the die set to add a little bit of the look of texture to the outside of our lemon and our orange. I also used some of my leftover little die cuts and added that to the inside, so when you open up the card, you'll see this element. You could also stamp something here, but I decided just to leave it as is. So let's look at our completed card. You can see it's 4 inches wide by 5.5 inches tall, and those little elements hang off the edge, but it still fits in my envelope. Now when it's closed, it's nice and flat, but as soon as you open it, that main cluster on the front kind of swings out and it'll stand really cool on display. So this is something that you can do with a variety of products that you may have, and it just makes something extra special that you can't buy in a store. And remember, this all opens up and there's plenty of room to write a personal message on the inside. And looking at this card now, I think I'm going to go back and spray that gold glitter dust on this also, because I think that bit of sparkle will add to the card. Okay, so now let's move on to our fourth technique, and this is definitely a simple one and one that's been around for a long time. I'll be using the new Concord and Ninth Filled with Joy stencil set. Now there are stencils, dies, and a stamp set that I'll coordinate, but you can buy them together or separately. These stencils make it really easy to create a card. This is actually a great option for a one-layer card because you can do the stenciling, then stamp a sentiment right there on the vase and you're good to go. But I'm going to add a little bit of pop-up dimension. So let's start by doing the stenciling. I have my Altenew sticky mat here that will hold my cardstock and my stencil in place as I ink on top. Now, I will be honest with you. I was in a hurry at this point. I was heading to my son's senior baseball game. So I wanted to see if I could make a really quick card from this. You'll notice I'm not doing a lot of ink blending. I'm not really caring to make sure that it's smooth. I'm just trying to quickly apply the Sweet Pea ink from Concord and Ninth over this first stencil. And you'll notice, even though I didn't take great care and I was hurrying my way through it, I end up with great results in the end. That is thanks to dye inks that kind of smooth out and blend into each other on their own. Here I'm coming in with the darker dragon fruit color and adding a little bit of that at the center of each flower. Now this doesn't take much time. I'm not taking much effort to blend once again, and it dries beautifully. Now for the smaller flowers, I needed a smaller blending brush, so I'm using the new Altenew micro blending brushes. Those are great for adding a bit of color just in those tiny spots. All right, now it's time to move on to the next stencil, which will add the center to these flowers. Over this, I decided to go bold, and I chose to use nutmeg. So this is a nice brown. You could instead use maybe a gold ink here. You could use a white ink. It would be even fun to just fill in the space, trace in these openings with a gold metallic pen. Lots of options, but I went for the quick nutmeg brown. By the way, there are little corners etched on these stencils, so you easily can line it up with an A2 card front. For the leaves, I'm using Sprout, and then I come in with parsley and add a little bit of that darker color at the base of these leaves. By the way, this card would be really fun if you did each of those flowers a different color, kind of creating a rainbow going across it, or just mix different colors together. But I created them all with the same pinks just to save a bit of time. All right, now we have the dot stencil. This just kind of fills in some of the spots in the background. You could skip this if you wanted to. You could use like a soft blue or gray if you want something subtle, but I wanted to add more pink. I wanted this to be bold, so I'm using the lighter carnation ink and adding that. Then finally, we have the vase, and you'll see that fits right in there. The top part of the stencil is to create individual flowers with stems that you can add in different ways. I'm not going to use that part in today's video, but do know they included that, so you can really make more from this product. So I used Buttercup over the vase, and then I'll come in with a little bit of the darker sunflower towards the bottom of the vase, just to create a little bit of the look of dimension. All right, so now we have that card front done. I mean, super fast, and you could just stamp a sentiment on there and be good to go. I wanted to pop out some of those flowers, 3 of them in particular. There are coordinating dies that cut out the 3 main flowers on this background. So you could cut them directly from your card panel and pop them up. But what I decided to do was to create 3 more flowers in the same way and die cut those out and pop them up on our panel that we have here. Just so you could see the flowers behind our popped up ones in the end. So I use the stencils in the same way just to create these 3 flowers. I didn't bother doing the leaves and such because I'm die cutting out the 3 flowers. I'm using the coordinating dies, using a little bit of tape to make sure those dies don't move as I do this quick die cutting. And now we can add them onto our card panel. I'm using mini action wobblers to add these flowers. These are little plastic springs that have adhesive on both sides, and they flatten very nicely, and then they immediately pop up and kind of shake around. Now, these mini action wobblers are normally used on like critter cards or playful cards, but they actually work really good on other cards for pop-up, instant, impactful dimension. Now, the mini version is the type of action wobbler I recommend because you can use them on the back of smaller elements like I am today. So you just remove the release paper from one side of the wobbler, stick it to the back of your die cut, remove the release paper from the other side, and press it onto your card. And I'm putting it right on top of the flowers that they match up with. Now, this last flower is really small, so I'm just cutting some of the corners off of my action wobbler, and that way it'll fit behind it and you won't see it. So now I can add this third one. So these will wiggle and shake when you touch them, and they really pop out from your card front a lot. They do flatten beautifully to go in an envelope also. So here is the completed card. Notice how they pop up. I'll show it from the top here. You can see how much they pop up with that spring instantly, and they will wiggle around when you touch them. Really fun way to add that dimension. I did add some little gold gemstones to the center of some of the flowers and little white dots with a white gel pen to some of the smaller flowers. The sentiment "You Are Beautiful" is stamped with black ink, and I like that Concord and Ninth designed those stamps to fit nicely on that vase. It was definitely made for this card. So there you can see the fun little wiggle movement. Action wobblers have a great price. Highly recommend having them in your stash. I know many of you already do because they've been around for some time, but I think we often forget how much fun they are to add to a card. All right, there you have 4 ideas for adding really impactful instant dimension that pops up and looks amazing on display. If you are looking for the supplies I used, I always provide a link, all the links to them in my description below. I also have a link at the top that you can click to see all of the products, including thumbnails, making it easy to find what you're looking for. And keep in mind, you can look at those links just for more inspiration and more card ideas. At the end here, I'll link to a couple other related videos, and I appreciate this time you've spent with me, and I'll see you again soon.